But the main question, the main theme in these two plenary sessions will be what constitutes resiliency for manufacturing? What lies ahead after this unprecedented shock? How can manufacturing adapt to a more sustainable world and be more resistant to eventual future shock? This is what 10 focus groups have been working on ahead of this edition of the World Manufacturing Forum. Professor Marco Taisch, who is scientific chair of the WMF, now will give us the evidence of the work of these 10 different groups inside the Back to the Future project. Professor Taisch.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And let me say also good morning and good evening for all the people following us on streaming from the different time zones all over the world. Let me start from what President Guzzella just mentioned. Manufacturing is the best vaccine that we have. I fully agree with this perspective, with this statement, and this is exactly the reason why the World Manufacturing Foundation exists. This is exactly the reason why we are working on understanding the future of manufacturing, on understanding and discuss all over the world with different people, with different community, what is going to be manufacturing, but also, and which is more important, what we need to do in order to have this to happen. This is exactly what we do with one of the two activities of the World Manufacturing Foundation, which is called, the first one, the one we are going to address and work today, is called Back to the Future. This initiative was started last year because we were having the pandemic. You may remember, it seems a long time ago, but it's only a year ago. And many countries, many areas all over the world were in lockdown. We were not able to have components, products received from those countries. We were not able to sell our products to those countries. The economy was really going bad, and we were not aware of what was going on. The ecosystem was changed. The rules of the game were changing. And we had to reinvent the rules. We had to understand the new rules. You may remember that we were using to call this the new normal. We were going to ask ourselves how the new normal is going to be, how we need to adjust our behavior, how we need to adjust our business models, and how we are going to support our SMEs. And this is exactly the focus and the reason why we launched this activity called Back to the Future. It was so successful that we have decided to repeat it also this year, using the same approach, using the same perspective, using the same model. And of course, if last year the question was what's going on, how we need to react, the focus this year is on the long-term resiliency in manufacturing. So that's what we did, and this is exactly what we did by having a number of groups spread all over the world with experts working with them and addressing detailed and specific topics within the whole framework of manufacturing. And for this reason, we had to ask ourselves what nations, what countries, what region should do in order to relaunch the manufacturing. You know that the European Union, the European Commission launched the Next Generation EU. Similar programs have been launched in other countries, and we need to learn from the others, and we need to spread the best practices. And supply chains, they are going to be redesigned. You know what's happened if a ship is in the middle of a channel and blocks the global supply chain. How are we going to face this kind of disruptions? How we are giving resiliency, how supply chains are going to be redesigned. They are going to be more local or more global or glocal, as it is said. And factories, they need to be redesigned. The concept of microfactories is a new concept. Microfactories requires less investment. In this perspective, they can allow startups in manufacturing, which is something new, because when we use the term startups, most of the time we refer to digital companies, but a startup in manufacturing is something different. is a business model that we can foster, that we can use in order to create new businesses. And technologies. AI was the topic of last year. The World Manufacturing Forum is not an old topic, it's still a current issue. I was reading this morning on the news that the European Commission is launching some activities about the fact that we need some kind of rules in adopting AI, because AI is so pervasive in our life, and is also pervasive in the manufacturing sector and field. And then we need to create know-how, competences, digital innovation hubs, competence centers, other initiatives, how they are able to spread know-how, how they are able to transfer the technology to companies and to SMEs. You know that the technology is there, the technology is mature. What is not mature is people and workers, and we need to help them in adopting the new technology. But then innovation is also important. Trend-driven innovation, I would like to point out the topic on trend-driven innovation is something that we need to adopt in manufacturing. It's very successful in other sectors, in other areas, but for sure it's something relevant for the manufacturing sectors. And then SMEs. SMEs are the backbone in many countries. Most of the European countries are based on SMEs, but this same of industrial structure is also important in other countries, and especially in the developing countries. So how we can transfer the lesson learned from the developed countries to developing countries by adopting or by increasing the development of SMEs. You may remember the last year and 2 years ago we spoke a lot about gender, about diversity in many senses, and also gender. So women in manufacturing are very important. Manufacturing is coming from the fact that we use the force of the arm, and that's why typically was something where the male gender was there. But since we are moving to a digital technology, to a digital environment where we are using data, this is the muscle that we are going to use. This is the muscle that we need, and in this perspective, no, women have an advantage towards the rest of the world. And then people. We need to invest in the future, and that's why we have a focus on young entrepreneurs and young people, and how they are and they should help manufacturing to become a new manufacturing, or let me say a new normal-based manufacturing. Those are the topic we addressed this year. Each of these topics has a report. You are invited to download this from our website, but those are the topics that we are going to address this afternoon in the two sessions. Just a little bit of a recap and give you some highlights on what we learned from the extensive work that our experts have done all over the world. So first, we need resiliency. That's something that we know. This is exactly the topic. Resilience is everywhere in our 2 days. But in order to do that, what we need to do? First, we need to promote a new global mindset at global level, but working at the same time at local level. Local capabilities are the backbones. Local capabilities are, let me say, the environment and the enabler for creating globalization, for creating stronger global supply chains. So we need to look at the two level. We need the special, let me say, high glasses to be global and to be local at the same time. And then collaboration and connectivity is very fundamental. We are speaking about collaboration since many years. Is still a hot topic. We shouldn't forget this. And then we need to develop new methodologies, new tools for anticipating the risk. Risk assessment has failed because it was not able to forecast some of the events that we have faced in the last couple of years. But then technologies, digital technologies can support us in building stronger and more resilient supply chain. We are living the so-called fourth industrial revolution. You know what I'm talking about. But how those technologies can support to create global supply chains and more resilient supply chain. I think we need to work on traceability and transparency. The technology is there. We are not yet fully exploiting their capabilities of those technologies to trace real time. I'm talking about real time, what is happening in order to forecast the near future. But if we invest in technologies, the risk is that we lose some SMEs. And we should avoid this for the fact that, as we said, SMEs are the backbone of the manufacturing sectors in any country in the world. And then third, last but not the least, is the data. Data are fundamental. Data are so-called the oil of the future. We can say anything. We can define them in many different ways, but the problem is always there. To collect data, transform data on information, and take decisions based on real-time data. That's something that we still need to learn how to do it in a more effective and efficient way. Third set of lesson learned, and this will be addressed more in the second session of this afternoon. We need policies. We need to create a policy-driven or based new environment, and we need to look for long-term policies. I know that politicians, since they have election, they tend to have a short-term view. We know that, we understand that, but I think it's really the time to look at 5, 10, 20 years in advance. The European Commission is doing that. There are other policies in China. There are other policies in US, just to mention few countries looking at 2030, 2050. This is fine, but we need some kind of stability in these long-term policies. And this needs to be to have a global view, a global perspective, work at worldwide level, but then we need to keep an eye at national level, and let me say at a regional level also. Incentives have been demonstrated how they can foster the adoption of digital technologies. We think, the expert that have been working think that this is something that we can leverage on. So let's say the message from this group is to keep on going with incentives to promote these, or let me say to speed up the digital transformation and the digital adoption. And then global technologies, digital technologies, and green technologies or green transition at the same time. Those are two trends. We need to work having in mind the merging of these two trends. Digital transition is the enabler for the ecological transition. And they can't be separated anymore. We need to merge them, and we need to find the proper link between those two transitions. And then people, workforce, has been mentioned already, but let me say reinforce the message. What we are observing from our studies is that buying technologies is easy. Adopting technology, let me say, it's quite easy. The link, or what can reduce the speed of adoption is people. We need to work on the people in order to fully exploit the potential of the technologies. So work on skills, work on diversity, any kind of diversity, not only gender, but cultural diversity, religious diversity, immigration, any kind of diversity is a value that we need to work on. And as we used to say, manufacturing, this is one of the motto of our foundation, manufacturing is the best peacekeeper in the world. Will be a peacekeeper if we are able to manage diversity. And then improve centers for the technology transition. Digital innovation hubs, competence centers are a model that European Union is adopting. There are other countries in the world, they call it with different terminology, but it's something that is needed. Those were, let me say, the messages that came up from our work, and they are going to be discussed in a few moments by our expert, by our speakers. Let me just give you an idea of the work. 9 faculty groups, more than 130 experts involved all over the world, 35 countries involved. So let me say, this is really representing the global perspective, is really representing the voice of the world. And for this, I think it's important to be used and, let me say, consider it a good starting point for the afternoon. Thank you very much, and Alberto, back to you.